I need to say this part first, before I lose my nerve. I didn't take the job to watch the weather. I took it because for 11 years I had been waiting for a screen, any screen, anywhere, to show me where my sister went. The company had cameras on 104 towers, all of them pointed at the same flat, God-forsaken stretch of Oklahoma that swallowed her. I told myself I was being practical. I told everyone I needed quiet, steady, work-from-home money, which was true. The truth underneath the truth is that I was hunting a ghost, and on the 64th night, the cameras gave me one. Let me tell you how the job actually worked, because the way it worked is the whole reason it broke me, and if you don't understand the machine, you won't understand what it did. The company was called Meridian Atmospheric. They ran environmental monitoring stations all over the western half of the state, little fenced squares of dirt out past the last paved road, each one a steel tower bristling with instruments that measured wind and soil and rainfall for insurance companies and grain co-ops, and the kind of government office nobody ever calls. Most of the towers had a camera bolted near the top, cheap, weatherproof, pointed at the horizon. Here is the part people always get wrong. There was no live video. The bandwidth out there is a rumor. Each camera took one photograph every 5 minutes and uploaded it. That's all. One still image, then 5 minutes of nothing, then another. My screen showed a grid of those stills, 104 little windows onto empty country, and each one ticked over on its own timer, refreshing itself, the world updating 5 minutes at a time. My job was to watch the grid and flag the ones that had gone wrong. A fogged lens, a spider web, a bird strike. A panel knocked sideways in a storm so the camera ended up staring at the dirt. I'd file a ticket, a crew would drive out in daylight and fix it, and the picture would come back clean. That was the entire job. I sat in the spare bedroom of a rented house outside Weatherford every night from 10 to 6, and I watched photographs of nothing slowly replace themselves with more photographs of nothing. I was good at it. Do you want to know why I was so good at it? Because 11 years ago I was supposed to be watching something else, and I looked away, and I have never been allowed to stop paying for it. Her name was Mara. She was 6. I was 17. It was the last week of that summer, out at our grandparents' place near the reservoir. A low brown lake ringed with cottonwoods and mud flats, and the kind of tall grass that closes over your head if you walk into it. Our parents had driven into town. I was in charge. Mara was in the yard in her yellow raincoat, the one she wore every single day, no matter the weather. A stiff plastic kid, slicker the color of a road sign. She would not take it off. It was the thing that made her her. In every photo we have of that summer, there's this little blot of traffic cone yellow somewhere in the frame. I was on the porch. There was a boy I was texting. I want to be precise about this, because for 11 years I've made myself be precise about it. I looked down at my phone and I typed something stupid, and I waited for him to type something stupid back, and that took, 90 seconds? 2 minutes? When I looked up, the yard was empty. They searched the lake for 9 days. Dogs, divers, a helicopter, half the county walking the grass in a line with sticks. They found one of her sandals at the waterline and nothing else. No body, no yellow coat. People drown in that reservoir and the lake gives them back. It's shallow and it's patient. It never gave Mara back. After a while, the official word became presumed, and my family slowly came apart in the quiet administrative way that families do, and I went out into the world carrying a single fact like a stone in my mouth. I looked away for 2 minutes, and the only thing I ever had to do was watch her. So when I tell you I took a job staring at 104 cameras pointed at that exact landscape, I need you to understand it wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't really about the money. Some animal part of me had decided that if I just watched long enough, hard enough, never looking away again, the screen would finally show me where she went. I never said that to anyone. I'm saying it to you now because of what happened next. For 63 nights, nothing happened, and the nothing was a kind of mercy. I learned the grid the way you learn a neighborhood. Station 18 looked out on a wheat field that went gold, then stubble, then frost. Station 51 had a grain elevator on its horizon with a red aircraft light on top. Station 76, that one, I avoided. Station 76 sat closest to the reservoir, the nearest camera to the place where I lost her, and for the first 2 months I could not make myself look at it for more than a second. I'd let it refresh and slide my eyes past it like you'd slide past a grave. I watched for her in every frame. I never admitted it, but I did. Every time a feed refreshed, I'd feel my eyes go straight to the low corners, the child height places, hunting for a small yellow shape. There never was one. After a while, I almost stopped hoping, which is its own kind of grief. The day hope quietly dies, and you don't even notice the funeral. Then came the 64th night. It was a little after 3 a.m, the dead middle of the shift, when the cameras switch to infrared and the whole world comes through in that grainy gray-green, like everything's underwater. Station 33, out near the Texas line, a dirt road, a fence, pasture running flat to the horizon. There was a figure standing at the fence. I didn't react. People exist. A rancher checking cattle at an ugly hour, standing at the station fence wondering what the tower was. I logged it the way you'd log a deer and moved on. 5 minutes later, Station 33 refreshed, and the figure was still there, and it was closer to the camera. Not by much. 3 feet, maybe 4. The kind of difference you'd never catch if you weren't already staring. But here's the thing that put the first cold finger on the back of my neck. In 2 photographs taken 5 minutes apart, the figure had not changed its posture at all. Same stance, same tilt of the head, arms at its sides. It hadn't walked closer. It had simply been closer, relocated nearer the lens without ever appearing to move through the space between. I told myself it was a prank. Some kid who'd figured out the upload schedule, staging a little horror movie for whoever watched the feeds. I even smiled. I filed a ticket. Possible trespasser requesting daytime check, and I felt good about handling it like a professional. The next refresh, Station 33 was empty. Just road and fence and pasture. And the refresh after that, Station 70, 80 miles east, 3 counties over, had a figure standing in the field. Same stance. Facing the camera. You cannot drive between those 2 stations in under an hour and a half. The photographs were taken 6 minutes apart. I sat very still and I felt the prank theory die in my chest, and underneath where it had been, something much older and much worse sat up and opened its eyes. Because I had spent 11 years waiting for a figure to appear on a screen out here. And now one had. And it was moving in a way no living thing could move. I did what I do. I mapped it. I'm the kind of person who maps things. It's how I keep from drowning. I had a paper atlas of western Oklahoma and a pad of sticky notes, and every night I tracked which stations the figure visited and in what order, looking for a pattern in the geography. Was it moving east, following the highways? Working a grid? It wasn't moving across the land at all. It was moving through the network. Station 33 to Station 70 to Station 12 to Station 88. Numbers, not places. It was going down the roster of camera ID in an order that was nonsense on the map, but perfectly orderly if you ignored the map and just read the list in our system, top to bottom. Like something walking through a building room by room, opening every door, except the building was 40,000 square miles wide and the rooms were lenses. And every single time, no matter what that station looked out at, fence, field, road, elevator, the figure approached the camera. Not a place, the eye. It would appear at the far edge of a frame, then close, then closer, that same impossible relocation, leaning in toward the lens until it filled the shot, close enough that I could see it had no real face, just a smooth gray smudge where a face should be. And then it would be gone, and it would be at the next station, starting again, far away, walking in. I had a thought one night at 4 a.m. that I have never been able to put back. It doesn't know where it is. It only knows it's being watched, and it's following the watching back to its source. I stopped sleeping. I'd watch the grid until 6, then lie in bed in the daylight with the curtains shut, and every 5 minutes some part of my brain would tick over expecting the world to refresh, and it wouldn't. And I'd lie there feeling like something had gone wrong with time itself. But I want to be honest about the worst part, the part I'm ashamed of. Underneath the fear, there was hope, because the figure was the first thing in 11 years that had answered me. I'd been screaming into the screens for a decade, and finally, something had moved. So even as it terrified me, I leaned closer to the monitors every night, not away. I wanted to see its face. God help me, I needed to know who was walking toward me. On the 9th night, I found out. It was Station 12, the close approach, the figure leaning in until it nearly filled the frame. And the infrared, just for that one photograph, caught it at the right angle and the right distance, and the smudge resolved not into a face. I still never got a face. It resolved into a coat, a small coat, a child's coat, stiff and plastic, hood up, and in infrared, certain colors read brighter than others. Bright surfaces throw back the light. Most things came through that camera in shades of gray. The coat came through nearly white. The way one specific color always blew out bright in every photograph we ever took of one specific summer. The figure walking through the network was a small child in a yellow raincoat. I made a sound I didn't know I could make. I sat in that spare bedroom in the dark, and I shook, and I could not get a full breath, because I knew that coat. I had spent 11 years describing that coat to police, and to therapists, and to the inside of my own skull at 3 a.m. There was no other coat like it in the world. I had lost it in the tall grass by the reservoir when I was 17 years old. And now it was small, and it was walking toward me through 104 cameras, one lens at a time, getting nearer the glass with every refresh. Mara. It was Mara. She was coming back. That was the night the story I'd been telling myself flipped completely inside out. It wasn't a monster in the cameras. It was my sister. And every terrible thing about how it moved. The impossible relocations, the way it leaned in to inspect each lens, suddenly read like something else entirely. Like a child who'd been lost in the dark for a very long time, going door to door, looking in every window, trying to find the one with someone she knew on the other side. I had to know where she was walking from. I went back through my map with my hands shaking, and I plotted it properly this time. Not the system order, but the actual physical locations of the stations she'd appeared at, in the sequence she'd appeared. And when I connected the dots on the paper atlas, they didn't scatter. They made a line. The line started at the reservoir. It started at Station 76, the one I couldn't look at, the closest camera to the place I lost her. And it walked outward, station by station, in a path that wandered across the counties, but always trended in one direction, toward Weatherford, toward the little rented house, toward the spare bedroom where I sat every night with my eyes on the screens. She was walking home, across 11 years and 40,000 square miles, through the only eyes that pointed at the country that took her. My baby sister was finding her way back to me, and I was the lighthouse. The watching was the thing she was following. Every night I sat down and turned on the grid. I was calling her in. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But you have to understand what 11 years of that particular guilt does to a person. I didn't want to run. I wanted to open the door. I had looked away from her once for 2 minutes and lost her forever. And now the universe was offering me the one thing I never thought I'd get. A second chance to look, and not stop looking, and bring her home. So I did the thing I had been avoiding for 2 months. I opened Station 76, the reservoir camera. And I went into the archives. I need to explain about the archives, because this is where the floor dropped out of everything. Meridian's cameras were new, but they weren't the first ones on those towers. The monitoring program was old, older than I'd realized, and an earlier, Cruder version of the camera network had been running on some of those same sites for decades. The images were terrible, low resolution, and nobody had ever looked at most of them. Back then, there was no person watching a grid in real time. The cameras just snapped their photos every 15 minutes and dumped them into a server that filled up and got backed up and forgotten. Years of unwatched photographs of empty country, sitting in the dark, seen by no one. I searched Station 76 for the week Mara disappeared. The system found it. The files were still there. They had always been there. And I sat in that chair at 4 a.m. and I scrolled to the afternoon she vanished, and the cameras had been watching the whole time. There was a frame time-stamped 3:48 p.m., the gap of time that has lived in the center of my life like a black hole. It showed the tree line at the edge of the reservoir, the wall of tall grass, gray and grainy and 11 years old. At the edge of the grass, walking away from the camera into the field, was a small figure in a pale coat, the back of her hood up, walking calmly into the tall grass where no one ever thought to look because everyone was dragging the lake. The camera saw her leave. The camera saw exactly which direction she went. The evidence of where my sister walked sat in a server for 11 years, and no one was watching the watcher. If a single human being had ever looked at these files, they would have known within an hour that she never went in the water at all. I started to cry the kind of crying that doesn't make noise. And then I looked at the rest of the frame and the crying stopped because she wasn't alone. Ahead of her in the grass, at the very top edge of the photograph, half out of frame, there was a second figure. Tailleur. Adult-shaped. Standing among the cottonwoods facing back toward the camera, waiting. And Mara, my Mara, 6 years old in her yellow coat, was walking toward it, following it, going to it the trusting, unhurried way a child goes to someone they've been told they can trust. Someone took her. Someone stood in those trees and called her out of the yard while I had my eyes on my phone and led her into the grass, and the only witness in the entire world was a forgotten camera on a steel tower that nobody ever checked. And I realized, with a coldness that started in my hands and climbed all the way up, that I had seen that tall figure before. It was in my grid. Now, the 80-mile relocations, the leaning into the lens. Some of those frames hadn't been the small one in the coat at all. I'd been so fixed on the child that I'd discounted the others. The tall one had been walking through the network too, the whole time, side by side with her. The thing that took Mara was coming home with her. It moved faster after that, as if it knew I'd finally seen it. The two figures tore through the western array, station after station, and I stopped sleeping entirely. Stopped eating, sat in that chair from dusk till long after my shift ended, watching them close the distance. The small one always a little ahead, the tall one always behind her, herding. They came down the roster toward the last stations, the high numbers, the 80s and the 90s, and I did the arithmetic the way you count the cars in a line you can't see the front of, and I understood that there were only a few cameras left. The last station on the entire roster, the highest number in the system, was 104. I had never paid attention to Station 14. Low priority, never flagged, a boring frame, even by the standards of a job where boring was the whole point. A small room, a desk, a single light. I'd always assumed it was an equipment shed somewhere. That's the thing about watching 104 windows onto the world. You never once think to ask where the 104th one is pointed. The figures reached Station 102, then 103. I watched the small coat lean into the lens at 103 and the tall shape behind her, and then they were gone, and there was one camera left, and I pulled it up with my heart slamming against my ribs, and I waited the 5 minutes for it to refresh. Station 14 was the inside of a room. My room. The spare bedroom shot from the high corner by the window in that grainy infrared gray-green. The desk, the chair. The wall of monitors glowing, 104 little squares of light. And in the chair, seen from behind, a woman sitting very still watching the screens. The back of my own head. my shoulders, the exact slope of someone who's been sitting too long in the dark. There was a camera in my room. There had always been a camera in my room watching me watch, and I had been looking at its feed without knowing it for 64 nights, and I had never once recognized the back of myself. I didn't turn around. I want you to understand that I have thought about that choice every hour of every day since, and I still don't know if it saved me. I sat dead still, and I looked at the photograph of the back of my own head, because some animal instinct told me that the only safe place left in the world was here, on this side of the lens, watching. That the instant I turned to look into the real room behind me, I'd no longer be the one doing the watching. I'd be the one in the frame. The refresh came. In the new photograph, the small figure in the yellow coat was standing in the doorway of the room, behind my chair, facing the back of my head, and the tall one was behind her. I almost turned around. You have to understand how close I came, because everything in me had been built for this exact moment. 11 years of penance. 11 years of I should have looked, if I had only looked. My sister was standing 6 feet behind me in the real, solid room, and all I had to do was turn my head and finally look at her and undo the worst 2 minutes of my life. My whole body turned toward the door, and I stopped because I finally understood what it wanted. It had never been Mara finding her way home. A lost child doesn't walk the cameras in roster order. A lost child doesn't herd a tall shadow along behind her like a leash. The thing that took her had learned something out there in the dark, in the grass, on that forgotten afternoon. It had learned what Mara learned in her last living minutes. That to be seen is to be real. That a witness is a door. Mara had looked back at the lens that day, into the one eye that was watching, asking to be seen. And the thing had felt that look land somewhere, in a server, in the dark. And it had spent 11 years walking every camera in the world to find the one human being who would finally look back. It needed me to turn around. My penance was the bait. The whole architecture of my grief. I looked away. I'll never look away again if I just keep watching. None of it was mine. It had been built in me, brick by brick, on the afternoon I lost her. For this one night, so that when my sister stood in the doorway, I would do the thing I'd promised myself for 11 years I would always do. I would look, and looking would open the door the rest of the way, and let the tall thing in behind her finish coming home. I did not turn around. I reached out without moving my eyes from the screen, and I tore the power strip out of the wall. Every monitor died at once. 104 windows slammed shut in a single second, and the room went black, and the dark behind me was just dark, and there was nothing in the doorway because there was no light left for it to live in. I sat in that blackness with my back to the door until the sun came up. I did not turn around once. Then I packed a bag in the daylight, and I left, and I did not give notice, and I never logged into the system again. That was a little over a year ago. I live in a city now, in a state far from Oklahoma, in an apartment where the windows look at other windows and there is no horizon anywhere. I chose it on purpose. I keep my phone in a drawer with tape over the lens. I do not own a single camera. The man I'm seeing thinks this is a quirk, and I have never tried to explain because there's no version of the explanation that doesn't end with him looking at me the way the whole county looked at me 11 years ago. I told myself it was over. For a long time, I almost believed it. Then last month, my cousin Dale, the one who got me the job, called me. He still works at Meridian. He'd been clearing out the old archive server, the forgotten one, the decades of unwatched photographs, and he found my account still had flagged files attached to it, and he wanted to know what he was looking at, because he couldn't make the timestamps make sense. I asked him which file. He said the one from Station 104. The room, the chair, the woman. I told him to delete it and never look at it again. And he got quiet, the careful quiet of a man who's about to say something he's been turning over for a while, and then he told me the thing that has kept me awake every night since. He said the file for Station 104 had a creation date. And the creation date was wrong, the way the engineers couldn't explain. The photograph of me sitting in that chair watching those screens, the back of my own head, had been created and filed in the system 11 years ago. The week Mara disappeared, the camera in my room took its picture of me before I was hired, before I said yes to the job, before I'd ever heard the name Meridian Atmospheric. The same week she walked into the grass, something filed a photograph of me, grown, sitting in a dark room, watching, waiting, and then it spent 11 years arranging my whole life, grief and all, to walk me into that chair so the picture would come true. I keep thinking I escaped. I tore the cord out. I left. I have no cameras. I look at no screens. I don't have to. But here's the thing. I can't stop turning over. The thing I called you to tell. The whole time, I thought I was the one watching. 104 windows onto empty country, and a woman in a chair flagging the ones that had gone wrong. I thought I was safe because I was the eye, not the thing in the frame. There were 104 cameras. 103 of them looked out at Oklahoma, and one of them had been looking at me my entire life. It is still out there, on a tower I'll never find, taking my photograph every 5 minutes, and somewhere in a server in the dark there is a frame of me, right now, in this apartment, with the windows that look at other windows. And the only thing keeping the thing in the doorway from finishing its walk home is that, so far, I have not turned around to look. I haven't slept facing a doorway in over a year, because the last thing I ever saw on that screen, in the half second before I killed the power, was the small figure in the yellow coat, and she had finally lifted her face to the lens. And after 11 years of imagining it, of begging God for it, of building my entire ruined life around the chance of it, I did not recognize her. Last sting 8 months later. A different desk, a different state, a training room at Meridian Atmospheric's regional office. A new hire sits in front of a wall of monitors, headset on, a manager pacing behind her with a clipboard. The grid glows in front of her. 104 little windows onto the dark, each one refreshing on its own 5-minute timer. It's her first overnight. She's nervous and bored in equal measure, the way you are when nothing has gone wrong yet. Anything that's fogged, webbed, knocked sideways, you flag it, you file it. The day crew handles it, the manager says, not really watching. You'll learn the boring ones. Most of them never change. The new hire nods. Her eyes move down the grid out of order, the way they tell you not to, and snag on the last station, the highest number. "What's that one?" she says. "It looks like a room." The manager glances at it. 104, old feed, equipment closet somewhere, we think. Never flags. Honestly, I don't know why it's still in the system. He goes back to his clipboard. On the screen, station 104 refreshes. It's a room, a desk, a wall of glowing monitors. And in the chair, seen from behind, a woman sitting very still watching the screens. The new hire leans in, frowning, because that's not equipment, that's a person, and she opens her mouth to say so, and stops. In the doorway behind the chair, small and pale in the infrared, there is a child in a yellow coat, facing the camera, facing her, smiling. The new hire's mouth has gone dry. "Hey," she says. "Hey, there's somebody. There's a kid in this one. Should I flag it?" The manager doesn't look up. "Flag anything unusual," he says. Daytime check. She moves the cursor to flag it, and her eyes drop to the corner of the frame, to the little gray line of data the system prints on every photograph. Station ID, conditions, timestamp. The timestamp is tomorrow's date. Behind her, very softly, in a building where every other room is empty and dark, she hears the sound of a child's plastic raincoat, somewhere down the hall, coming closer. And the manager, still not looking up, still pacing, says the last thing she will ever hear him say. "Whatever you do, don't turn around."